Hi, I'm Tony Russo, and this is Funeral Service Insider from Kates-Boylston, featuring conversations about emerging trends and news affecting death care from the perspective of people who understand the delicate balance of change in a profession and vocation steeped in tradition. In this episode, I talked to Samuel Perry. He's an assistant lecturer of mortuary science at Southern Illinois University at Carbondale. I spoke with him back in March, originally for a story that I was working on about a Green Cemetery certification program from the Green Burial Council. He's a member of the Green Burial Council as well as a teacher at Carbondale. And one of the interesting things about our conversation, especially in retrospect, is since that conversation, there have been some changes at the Green Burial Council, and you can see kind of the beginning of the altering public face here when, Sam is talking about different ways to go kind of green. Now, let me be clear that he is still more an advocate for being very green, but it was a great conversation about the possibilities that green burial presents. So take a listen, and please remember to stay on after the credits for the postmortem. I'll catch you on the other side of this. Meanwhile, here is Samuel Perry. So you've been teaching at SIU for the last several years, but before that you were teaching elsewhere. What made you want to bring green practices more to the fore of not only funeral service, but also funeral service education?
Yeah, so I have been teaching at SIU for since August, actually, but teaching this particular course since 2018. And what really made me want to bring it to the forefront is that when I went to mortuary school, this was something I was interested in, but it didn't exist for me. I had to go out on my own and dig and find the people that were also interested in this to be able to even begin to learn what I needed to know to have funeral services that were environmentally friendly. So I was excited to have gotten experience in the field and then get an opportunity to teach so that I could bring the very topic that I wanted to learn as a student to the students of now.
It's interesting that you started into the funeral industry not knowing how green it wasn't compared to how it could be. Can you talk about like that realization, because you got to mortuary school and you learned everything you needed to know, but I guess, is it fair to say you didn't learn everything that you wanted to know?
Sure, yeah. So I got into funeral service because, ironically, I loved being outdoors. I was a lawn maintenance kid in high school and got connected to the funeral home in my town through lawn maintenance and got more interested in the field through working there. And I got into school not really knowing exactly what it was because we just don't talk about death and
Right.
what it involves. And when I got into school, I learned more about what it was and started to realize that I didn't think it was for me because it didn't really meet me where I was. I wanted to protect the outdoors and enjoy the outdoors, but everything I was learning in school was sort of the opposite of that. And so it was a bit concerning at first, but I had professors and friends who really valued my perspective and really encouraged me to keep to stay in the field and to try to learn more and try to help others learn more about what I was interested in too.
Can you talk to me a little bit about your own kind of half self, half helped education in green funeral service?
Yeah, so I originally stumbled upon, I would say, my people in the field through a communications assignment that I was doing in college, where we had to compare contrasting, basically, communities. And so I chose the National Funeral Directors Association and the Funeral Consumers Alliance, and I wrote about that contrast. And so that's sort of where I started learning about this field through the Funeral Consumers Alliance. And then they introduced me to the Green Burial Council through the Green Burial Council, I started realizing there's all these cemeteries around the nation that I could be learning from. So I actually borrowed my parents' car and went on an East Coast trip and visited as many green cemeteries as I could while I was in college and talked to the providers at those cemeteries. And they introduced me to funeral directors, and I talked to funeral directors who did green funeral services that went to these green cemeteries. Towards the end of my college career, I also was able to study abroad. Pretty fortunate to do something
Yeah,
like
that's
that.
pretty rare.
Yeah, and I did independent studies of death cultures on that trip, and so I got to learn different world cultures and their practices in death and dying, and how they didn't really embalm or, have these environmentally harmful practices. They just either simply buried or had totally different views that I hadn't even considered. And then
I'm
at the
sorry,
very end
I
of
want to
my
interrupt you there because where did you go?
Yeah, so I went on this trip called Semester at Sea, which was a really cool experience. It was a bit bougie and a choice. It was definitely a very big financial choice in my life that I'm still paying for to this day. But I went on Semester at Sea, and I don't regret it anyway. We actually were on a cruise ship, and we stopped at 11 countries around the globe, and so we circumnavigated the globe. And I went to countries like Spain, Ghana, South Africa, India, Japan, China, and then Hawaii and Canada as well. So
And
we
you were the only person from mortician school, I think, on the boat. Was that right?
That's right. Yeah. In fact, I ended up doing on a shipboard seminar on death and dying with the shipboard spiritual leader and a psychologist, and shared my studies. And we talked about death and dying around the world to the community. And then I was also really lucky to be involved honored to be involved in a shipboard memorial that occurred for a past student who had died. And I helped organize a memorial service in the middle of the Indian Ocean for that person, and we scattered his remains out in the Indian Ocean. So I had a really extravagant but
Wow.
valuable experience for my education.
And then you come home on fire and you go to work at a regular funeral home.
Yes, and I mostly worked in Indianapolis. And in that time, I did a West Coast trip of green cemeteries as well. I started to try to implement these services at that funeral home. And there was some reluctancy, and I was also supported in a lot of ways. And people were very interested in the idea. And so I wouldn't say I was ever involved in full-fledged, green burials, because not a lot of people knew about it, and there weren't a lot of resources accessible to us. But people were very interested in the idea, and that has only grown since I was there.
It's interesting. I think in the May issue of American Funeral Director, we have a story about, how to kind of deal with students coming out of mortuary school, and this idea that you don't have to adopt all their new ideas, but if you listen, if they feel listened to, they're more likely to stay. It's a story about attracting top candidates. Did you feel listened to when you were saying these are some of the things I think can be done?
I can't say I always did, but I can't say that I was never listened to either. And, I think as a young person at that time, I had a lot of ideas that I thought were really great. And maybe from the perspective of the owners that I worked for, they weren't all great ideas. And maybe they were, maybe they weren't. And I think some of them didn't maybe realize how popular green funeral services might become either. I'm also from a rural town in Indiana, so I wouldn't say that it was the most liberal or had a lot of change in culture, very quickly.
Mm.
But then I also worked in Indianapolis, which is a bigger city, but still Indiana. And so you kind of have this mix of like conservative views but like urban setting with some more liberal views. So I I have kind of always struggled in the Midwest to be heard, and I think it had more to do with the culture of the Midwest than it did necessarily with the particular funeral directors I was working for.
But yet you find yourself teaching one of the few green burial courses on the planet in a university in Chicago. Well, in Illinois, sorry.
Illinois, yeah, in Southern Illinois. So
Sorry.
that's okay. No, yeah. I mean, I've just stuck with it and really been very, very interested. And what I'm being told and finding now is that the movement really wants to connect to the funeral industry, and the funeral industry is starting to be more willing to listen. And so I find myself kind of poised to be able to speak to funeral directors and support the green burial movement, which can be difficult because in some ways they are opposing ideas, but they don't have to be.
And how are the students that you've had in class? I know you haven't started. Well, by now the virtual class has started, but you have students in a classroom. How have they responded to it?
Yeah, generally, I think my students have been really excited about the topic. It does change depending on the age of the student. All my younger students are always very, very excited about the ideas and interested in learning more. I have had older students who are more on a degree completion path and maybe have a little more wisdom and questioning some of the logistics of how this would all look, which is great because it helps us move forward in an honest, transparent way. I think have some reluctancy to accept all the ideas, but provide really valuable questions to be answered as in the field.
So how did you end up taking it out of the classroom and putting it online and partnering with the Green Burial Council to get this all done?
So this originally was online. So the pilot course was actually online, and that is what I did from 2018 till 2022. More recently, I've converted it to an in-person class, which has been a lot better because I get better feedback. We can do a lot of stuff in person as far as learning how to shroud or viewing and looking at green merchandise, understanding how to care for the body in person. And so converting it back online hasn't been too difficult because I already had that. But it does have its limits as far as what we can do to learn together.
And how you've overcome that by, but you have a way to get in touch with people. It's not just that they're watching. Can you tell me a little bit about, I'm sorry, let me put it this way. Can you tell me a little bit about how the course is set up, this certification?
Yes. So through redesigning the end, the course is asynchronous, meaning people can go on and take the course at their own pace, and we're not together in real time. But they have access to me as far as email, and we can do Zooms or phone calls if they have additional questions. They each week will have a video lecture from me and a plethora of resources that they can go through and other guest lecturers as well. So in my weekly lectures, I basically tie all of those resources together into one lecture and make it a little easier to decompress. And then the students can dive deeper by investigating particular materials or even other perspectives, such as other experts in the field. We also have reading each week, and that comes from Changing Landscapes, which is a book that was edited and compiled by Webster. It's an anthology of experts from the field as well. So it's a very dynamic and well-rounded course as far as perspectives go. You hear from cemeterians, funeral directors, home funeral guides, death doulas, ethicists, engineers, ecologists, product providers. You name it, they're in that book or in the course.
And for people who aren't familiar, can you talk about who Lee Webster is?
Yes, so Lee Webster is a big figure in many different fields of death and dying. She has helped create and form the National Home Funeral Alliance, the Green Burial Council, Conservation Burial Alliance, and now she also has her own statewide not-for-profit in New Hampshire for funeral education as well. She is a journalist and educator. She produces a ton of educational materials for all of those groups and has in the past. So she is a very dynamic and strong leader in the field as far as education goes.
All right, we're going to take a quick break now and speak with Marketing Director Lucia Igani, and she's here to talk about some of the upcoming webinars on Kates-Boylston.com. We have webinars all the time. What are the two coming up in June?
So we have one coming up on June 15th. It's hosted by Vince Roberge from Johnson Consulting Group. We have another one on June 22nd, hosted by Emily Miller and Rachel Essig from Green Burial Council.
And one of the cool things about it is people don't have to be there. These are what we happen to be having in June, but we have dozens online already from past ones.
Yes.
And if you just sign up, you can always get access to any of the on-demand webinars that we have.
Right. So I say to visit our website and go to the webinar section, and you will see the current webinars that will be going live and the dates, and you can register there, as well as the past webinars that have happened.
And when we book these, we try to make them kind of evergreen. This isn't how to fix your business this week or anything like that.
No, it is. And it's nice that it's on demand, and so you can watch it from the comfort of your own home at any time.
Excellent. Well, thanks for joining me. And now we're going to get back to the show. I've been really interested in the bridge lately between people like her and let's just call them, quote, regular, unquote, funeral directors, professional funeral directors. Death doulas are another example that I've written about, where they're kind of doing the outreach that sometimes I think funeral directors are a little loath to do, because it's maybe more in your face than they're used to being. But they're out there and they're trying to normalize death in a way that makes people feel more comfortable about it, and having them work with funeral directors to kind of re-envision what funerals will be in the future. I think it's exciting, but it's also an interesting dynamic to look at.
Definitely. And I think all of us are seeing the benefits of coming together and working together to create more options in the death and dying field.
And so having put this course together, what are you doing now to kind of get it out there for people to see? What makes it useful for, let's say, a funeral director who's been working for 10 years already? What's appealing about the course to that person?
Definitely. So the asynchronous format allows a busy person like a funeral home owner or funeral director to take the course at their own pace. We're also currently working on getting it CEU certified so that you can get continuing education from the course. Mm-hmm. It will also help you stand out in your community as someone who's offering something different than maybe the competitors in your area, because what consumers are finding is that they're really interested in this idea, but they don't know where to get it. And if you take the course, you can learn how to communicate this to your public and have them start coming to you, and also feel like you can support this particular community so that you're ready to support them when they do start coming to you.
And have you spoken with anyone who's completed the course and been able to kind of implement things when they got back to work? How much feedback have you gotten from past students about what was useful? Because you said you're also tweaking the course as you go along every time you like to continually update it.
Yeah, so I'm always talking to funeral directors about this topic, the community about this topic, and that's what allows me to update it and make it better. I always talk to my students at the end of the course to find out what I can do better right as they're leaving my course. But since this course is so new, I haven't had a ton of opportunity to get feedback from students after they've implemented it into their community. So that would be a really great data set to start looking into. I am excited to kind of start getting that feedback, but I can't say that I have a ton of that yet.
That's fine. And what are some of the changes, though, that you have made from what have you added? What have you decided you could do more different?
The most recent thing that I'm doing is adding more on body care. Body care and especially embalming has always been a central part of funeral service. It's really a keystone art of funeral service. And the course itself in its infancy didn't have a lot, surprisingly, on that. It had some, and a lot of it had more to do with care of the body outside of embalming, which makes sense because in the field, most people who are interested in this are interested in moving away from invasive procedures that manipulate or change the body, and embalming is just that in a lot of ways. So I've been diving deeper on those concepts and kind of where those concepts might be necessary, especially as far as restoration of the body, and how can we still be green or environmentally friendly when we're restoring the body, but maybe not embalming it, and how can we emphasize body care outside of embalming, because there's so much post-mortem body care that occurs through the embalming process, but we only talk about the chemical preservation piece of it. But there's all of these other aspects that bring the body dignity, like washing the body, dressing the body, posing the body, that are essential for creating dignity in any funeral service. And so that is an area that I've been exploring and expanding more for this particular course.
You also talked earlier about green merchandise, which is something, it's one of those things that you hear and you're like, well, of course there's green merchandise, but it's not something that's maybe right in your forefront. And I'm also wondering what companies that are selling green merchandise are doing to get themselves in front of funeral directors to show them these options. So can you talk to me kind of about what the different things that you've seen are and how funeral directors can get their hands on them if they haven't heard of them before, that kind of thing?
Yeah, so there's lots of new products all the time in funeral service, and a lot of them help us reimagine the way that we provide services in death. And some of them are more environmentally friendly than others. I think it's nice that we have an entity like the Green Burial Council who is looking at all of these products to sort of set a standard for what actually is green and what actually isn't quite green. And we need to be thinking about greenwashing and what greenwashing is. So people advertising that products are environmentally friendly when they actually aren't. So we talk about that quite a bit in the course. There are, like I said, many people providing these types of products. And so the course will give you a foundation for looking at them and deciding whether these truly meet an environmental ethic or not. And they're honestly kind of hard to avoid as a funeral director at this point because these products, and so I think they're easily found at conventions or online. All vendors are starting to have something that is, quote, environmentally friendly. I think the important thing to get out of the course is to look at them more critically and see whether they meet the ethic and of being environmentally friendly.
The fact that they're on the rise kind of suggests that people are meeting the market rather than trying to invent something. This must be market driven. If there are companies that are like, okay, well, we have to start greening up our practices for our death care services.
Exactly, yeah. So the National Funeral Directors Association does a consumer survey every year, and in 2022, they found out that over 60% of consumers are interested in green funeral services. So there's clearly, and they're a big, provider of information to the industry, and so people are looking at that and seeing that there is a need, and the markets are responding.
Excellent. And that is all I have for you, unless you have something else for me. Is there something that you didn't get a chance to talk about that you were really hoping to talk about?
I think the only other thing I'd like to say is that it's exciting to be a part of this field, because even though it's a callback to what our ancestors did, just simple burial directly into the ground, we're kind of rediscovering it in our modern world, where we are maybe more concerned with cleanliness or sanitation, or even laws and infrastructure, and how we can bring this idea back to our modern world. So it's exciting to be here and learn together as a community to make it better as an industry. And I hope that people come to this with the mindset that this is just the beginning, and we can together make our industry more environmentally friendly.
Excellent. And if someone wants to learn more about the course, where can they go to find out more about the course? More about the, because there are all sorts of things, but let's talk about the course. Where can someone go to learn about the course?
Either at Redesigning the End or the Green Burial Council's website. Redesigning the End has it pretty clearly on their landing page. There are two green funeral service courses. One is the Green Burial Master class, which is geared more towards cemeterians or cemetery workers. And then there's the Green Funeral Service course, which is the one we're talking about, which is geared more towards funeral directors and funeral practitioners. So Redesigning the End is a great place to go to see that. If you want to learn more about the certification, you would go to the Green Burial Council's website, greenburialcouncil.org, and click on their education tab, and you'll find both courses, the Green Burial Masterclass and the Green Funeral Service course, in that tab, and you can learn more about how to become certified with the Green Burial Council.
Very cool. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, of course.
Funeral Service Insider, the podcast, is a Kates-Boylston production. It was written and edited by me, Tony Russo. Make sure you check out the show notes for more information on Sam Perry and the Green Burial Council and Southern Illinois University Carbondale. And if you want to reach me, you can do so at arusso@kbpublications.com. You can also leave me a voicemail at 732-746-0201, or you can record a message on your voicemail and send it in to me. No matter how I get it, if you send it along and it's appropriate, I'd be happy to play it. Next week, we'll have Tony Cumming joining us. He's the new president of Pinnacle Funeral Services, and now for the postmortem. This week, I want to direct you to Kates-Boylston.com. You can get there through the show notes. And particularly, I want to direct you to the really kind of heartwarming and just important, I guess, tributes to Todd Van Beck, who died May 23rd. If you're not familiar with him, he was a giant in death care. He was well loved by pretty much everyone. More people reached out than I've ever had reach out before to talk about how good and kind and helpful Todd Van Beck was, how he embodied funeral directing. And it was really inspiring to hear someone relatively new to the space. I did not have a chance to meet him. And it was really, really heartwarming to see everyone come out and just pay their respects in just the most deep and meaningful ways. So you can catch a bunch of those on Kates-Boylston.com right now. If you subscribe to American Funeral Director, we'll have even more tributes to him in the July edition. So please stay tuned for that and check out the new website. Tell us how you like it. We're pretty proud of it. As always, if you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe now. It's free to subscribe. You can just click the follow button, and that way the episodes will just show up on your phone and you can listen to them right after I put them out. That is it for this week on Funeral Service Insider, the podcast.